All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to make our next guest feel very welcome. He is the first person in the Australian Parliament who stood up against the madness, costing him his job. He sacrificed so much in pursuit of the truth. He has been there batting for the people so courageously. Please make him feel welcome, the very much loved Craig Kelly. First of all, Craig, welcome to MCJ Report. Welcome back to Victoria. I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say that we're very happy to see you back down here in Danistan. How does it feel to be back?
Well, it's great to be back down, and thankfully, no one has come up and attacked me with an egg so far.
Well, that's nice.
So we've got security behind us, so hopefully we'll be right tonight.
Well, you're still here for a few more days, right? Craig, we absolutely love you. Now, you were the first member of Parliament who stood up for the people in pursuit of the truth. The Prime Minister dragged you into his office. He said, Craig, you need to stop making these posts on the internet. You went out there, you continued to spread the truth. You felt a duty within you. Can you please talk to us a little bit about your mindset during that time? Was it difficult? What challenges did you face? And why ultimately did you decide to stand up knowing that it would most likely cost your job?
Yeah, it was a very difficult period of time. I was fortunate enough to be able to speak to many doctors around the world that were telling me something completely different to what the official narrative was coming out of our health bureaucrats. And I just felt as a member of Parliament that I was in a special place at a special time. I had an obligation to speak out. And yes, the Prime Minister told me to shut up multiple times, and eventually became where I had either a choice to stay within the party and the protections that the party gives you and the party machinery gives you, and go against my conscience or speak out in what I believed in, which I knew would ultimately be very costly. I just felt I had no choice in the position I was in.
And I appreciate it, and so do so many others. And I'd like to just ask you another question on a little bit of a deeper level about your mentality during the time. Was it exceedingly stressful for you? Were you losing sleep, or were you quite comfortable? Could you just talk to us a little bit about Craig Kelly wakes up and he knows that Scott Morrison is about to say, hey, you need to come to my office and talk. What is going on in your mind?
It was more of think of, am I going mad? Have I missed something? Is there some data pointers? Why am I seeing things differently to what all my other parliamentary colleagues are seeing? I'm thinking, is there something actually wrong with me? But the more I would read, the more I'd research, the more different people I'd speak to actually working at the coalface and actually medical people with experience. It led me to believe that I was exactly on the right track. And the Prime Minister, I said, the Prime Minister, very unfortunately, was being very, very poorly advised by health bureaucrats, and that's where a lot of the core of the problem was.
That makes complete sense. And in regards to the former Prime Minister, I would think he's not an unintelligent man and would have the capability to seek information to perhaps sway him differently from the advice of the bureaucrats. Some of us were wondering what's going on with Scott. Has he not sought alternative information?
I think, look, the bureaucracy in Canberra is just so strong. And it actually, in many ways, it sits above the two political parties. So what the bureaucrats tell, I remember, is Josh Frydenberg Josh was our energy minister and so-called climate change or stopping bad weather minister. Well, that's what it's called, right? And he was basically being dictated to by the bureaucrats. And we'd have meetings and the bureaucrats would come in and put a cup of coffee on his table and I'd say, check that, stop. I bet you that's got the green Kool-Aid in it. Because the ministers were actually dictating what he was doing. And as a minister, you used to be so busy with so many other things, you're relying on your bureaucrats. And if they're only feeding you one side of the story, and when the media is only parroting that, I can see where the other narrative comes in, and by then it's too late for that narrative to grab a foothold.
That makes sense. And during this time, could you please talk to us a little bit about the degree of support that you received from your colleagues silently, who came up to you and said, Craig, we know that you're right about all this stuff, but we can't say anything because, we've got pre-selection coming up, etc. Did that sort of stuff happen?
Look, there are a few that did that, but generally Parliament was a pretty lonely experience at that period of time. You would walk around the corridors and I could definitely remember Greg Hunt, the health minister at the time, couldn't even look me, couldn't even look me in the eye as we walked down in the corridor. But there are other parliamentarians that come up, and you're right, and they'd look around to make sure there was no one around in the corridors, and they come and they go, yeah, Craig, I agree with you. I say, well, for goodness sake, can you say something and speak up? Oh, no, I can't do that. Yeah. That was the most disappointing thing that I felt in my career, is that people that I'd been there and felt that I was fighting side by side in the trenches with, as soon as the bullets started firing, they were fleeing out the back door.
Well, we need more people like you in Parliament. Do we agree, ladies and gentlemen? We need more Craig Kellys in Parliament. Now I'm going to frequency hop for a second here. You have recently given a great deal of hope to the Australian public with a victory over the AEC legally.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about the case and a few of the measures that were involved in your road to victory?
Yeah. So yes, sir. But this goes back to the during the election campaign, when I've got an email from the AEC saying that my authorisations on the bottom of my corflute, which is, everyone knows the authorisations that says authorised by Craig Kelly and my office address, they said my font size was too small. Right? And they had made a determination based upon a photograph that was taken from 50 yards away. So I thought this was ridiculous, but you've got so many other things during the election campaign you're fighting about, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to argue over a font size when we're arguing about people being put out of jobs from their vaccine mandates, people being forced to take. There were so many important issues to fight. So I said, okay, I'll just print new signs, I'll print stickers, it'll all be done and fixed, and it's one less thing I get to worry about. On election eve, 8:30 at night it was, election eve, I'm sitting in my office. You know what people would know here. Election eve, you're running around. You've got 1,001 signs going everywhere. There's chaos in the office. I get a call from Clive Palmer. Clive goes, oh, there's a bit of a problem. He says the AEC are taking you to court. They don't want you to campaign tomorrow. No? And I thought it was one of Clive's bad jokes, and it's election eve. So, yeah, Clive, sure, yeah, funny joke, ha, 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 right? I didn't know at the time the AEC had filed court documents at 7:38 p.m. on election eve, seeking an urgent interim injunction before the federal court that would have prohibited me from campaigning on election day. So the orders they sought, which the judge read the decision at 10:30 p.m. on the Friday night, was that the order that they were seeking, that I had to go around each one of my 42 election booths, starting midnight that night, in an hour and a half's time, and inspect each booth not once but 5 times. And up until 4 p.m. So if I had have campaigned any time between 4 p.m. in the evening of the next day, I would have been in contempt of court and liable for all the penalties such that come with contempt of court, including arrest and imprisonment. So that was, luckily the judge threw that out, awarded costs to us. I thought, well, that's it, the AEC's been smashed. They won't come back again. No, they came back again after the election and filed another prosecution against me, seeking penalties of $100,000 because they found about 5 of my signs that still had the original small font size on it. So I'm dragged before the federal court. I'm sitting there. The government has 4 barristers in the wigs and gowns and 6 advising solicitors. So a legal team of 10 people. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, now I know what it would have been like to be involved in one of those Soviet show trials where the weight of the government is against you. Remember, the penalties they're seeking, $100,000 fine, plus their costs, which would be another several $100,000 more, plus your own legal costs. So the potential liability for myself for that case was in excess of $1 million. And their case was completely frivolous. It had no basis. It was not only thrown out, it was thrown out with costs. And the judge in his comments said the AEC's conduct was unreasonable and unjustifiable.
And what a great victory. And I think the moral of the story for the AEC is you just don't mess with Craig Kelly. Is that fair?
Well, this is the craziness of it all. This shows how stupid some of these bureaucrats are, right? They should have known I was fortunate enough to have Clive Palmer's legal team representing me. Clive standing in the background, supporting me financially on the case. Plus a stubborn bastard like me that the thing's not going to give in, right? And because I got great pleasure out of sort of baiting them on Twitter and still having a go at them on Twitter. So,
good.
Yeah, but I've called over this for the head of the AEC to resign, because this is an important issue. We need the Australian Election Commission in this country to be above any political partisanship. We need them to be above questioning, because the people it affects are often our people. Because they think sometimes you can tell people, it's all rigged, it's all fixed, why would I bother voting? The group that hurts us is the freedom movement people, because that deters people from voting for our cause. So that's why I've called for the head of the ACCC to resign, for the damage that he has done to the AEC's reputation.
Very good. Now, Craig, we had a great conversation the other day. It was great to reconnect. And we had a discussion about moving forward in Australia in terms of the smaller parties in our country, which are either from a conservative base, freedom-orientated, or libertarian. And you shared some thoughts with me about some optimistic thoughts for the future. Yeah. Should there be some greater organisation? You've got some strong thoughts on this topic. Would you mind discussing that a little bit with us?
Look, I know over the last 12 months after the election campaign, we had a lot of meetings like this, and the general sentiment has been, why don't you guys all get together and form one party? That's the sentiment, right? Now, if we look at the electoral system that we have as what we have to work with, we're talking about the federal electoral system. In the lower house, at the moment, I don't think that's a good idea. I think our diversity in many ways can be a strength. Let all the parties go and fight for those lower house seats. And we have to admit that's going to be very difficult for any candidate to win a federal lower house seat. But where we can be successful is in that Senate. Now, if we had been able to get a very strong flow of preferences in the last election, we would have not just one senator in Ralph and Pauline, or two with Ralph and Pauline Hanson. We would have had 6 senators, one from each state. But what happens with the preferences just don't flow, they spray everywhere. So I believe the way we need to look at it is some type of joint ticket arrangement, and this is just something to throw on the table, the way the Liberals and the Nationals do it. They compete separately in the lower house seats, with some arrangements where they won't compete. But in the Senate, there's not a Liberal ticket and a National ticket, it's a joint ticket. And I believe if we could come up with some arrangement like that, if we can get our heads together and negotiate that with a fair distribution of who gets number 1 or number 2 in what states, we can get 6 senators at the next election, which would give us 8 with a real chance of a balance of power, and 6 at the next election, which would give us 12, which would give us the balance of power and be able to change the country and hold whoever is in power accountable.
So if there's one thing you know about Craig Kelly, Craig does his research. If you followed his Facebook before Facebook took him down, or you followed Craig's Telegram, and I highly recommend you do, Craig Kelly is one of the most measured people that you can follow online, and he does not make these types of statements willy-nilly. The numbers are out there, and should an arrangement like this take place, what Craig has explained is so absolutely possible for our country. Now, Craig, there are perhaps some people out there that are feeling a bit down. They say, well, we haven't achieved as much as we should since COVID, and we have men and women who have lost faith in the future, or faith in our country, or faith in their fellow Australians. What would you say to people like this who are in a dark place, who desperately want change but are beginning to give up hope?
Firstly, I'd say, never forget what we've achieved. You only have to go back 12 months or so, 18 months or so, and the idea of vaccine passports were meant to be rolled out and maintained for years. And when they set those vaccine passports up, you would have had multiple shots to keep your vaccine passport intact to go and get a haircut. It is because people in this room, and people like you people in this room all around the country, stood up and fought and went to those protest rallies, that the government pulled back on the day. So never underestimate what we've achieved. We should be celebrating that success that we've had, but we also should acknowledge that there are a lot of battles ahead that we have to fight. We've got the World Health Organization trying with a power grab, but I know, as Ralph said before me, the biggest issue that we have in this country to face is that misinformation and disinformation bill. Because if we lose that, you lose the ability to fight every other single fight. This is a shocking bill. This is something you would expect out of a 1984 novel. It will give the government power to order not only Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, but Rumble and BitChute and the rest of all the other smaller platforms, to censor them all, and it will be the government deciding, the government becoming the arbiter of truth. We must fight for this. We must fight for this. Like our life depended on it, because if we lose this one, it is so hard to fight all the other fights.
And moving forward, Craig, what are your plans for the future, and how can people support you in your endeavours?
Look, at the moment we have to realise that the war we are in is an information war. So I spend a lot of my time, thankfully as Chairman of the United Australia Party, as National Director of the United Australia Party, making sure we've got a very strong presence in the social media space, that we are getting information out like this. We've got a whole lot of events planned coming up, running up into the next election, where we can fight that information, where we can get the information out. Because the facts are, in this debate, all the data, all the science is all on our side. It is the other side that are using the tactics of misinformation, disinformation, and trickery and lies. So the information is on our side. We've just got to make sure that we are fighting that hard to get that out to people. And there's no magic bullet. It's hand-to-hand combat, one person at a time, one neighbour, one friend, one acquaintance. And when they have time to analyse the data and you have to present it to them over and over and over again, you'll convert them and they'll be on our side.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge round of applause for Craig Kelly. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well spoken.